Listen, if you love defensive football, you were in for a fight down at Kyle Field. But if you're going to go ahead and complain about offensive inconsistency, my God, calling this a rock fight is an insult to rocks. 10-3 final score out in Kyle Field. Texas A&M now bounced from the college football playoff in its first season ever making the trip. And a lot of questions go into what does the future look like for this offense? What direction do you go now with Holman Williams taking over as your offense coordinator? And what truly went wrong when it came to the passing attack? Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered postgame show. It's called Thompson here. Like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk Aggie football. We're talking college football. We're talking SEC conversation throughout the entire weekend. So make sure you are subscribed. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, link in the description, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And as always, we are proudly brought to you by our friends over at FANDUEL. Sign up today at FANDUEL.com/SECU. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. When you win your first $5 bet, could be on Miami to pull off the upset. Okay, I'm not even going to go that far. We don't know what the line is for Ohio State, but I think that most of us are all going to say, yeah, the Buckeyes have a very fun trip making an appearance down to the likes of, whatever is going to be the semifinals, because you're probably going to win that game. 10-3 final score. There were more missed field goals than touchdowns in this game. There were more ejections from Kyle Field because of MIP and possession of disbanded paraphernalia from the Aggie Land Police than points scored in this game. And there were far too many bad turnovers and really risky shots that ultimately led to the demise of Texas A&M and somewhat of a surge for Miami. Neither one of these teams played good offensively. I want to make this abundantly clear. If you're going to tell me that Malachi Tony's late touchdown tells the entire story of Miami's offense, you have no idea what you're talking about. We basically saw what is the epitome of a regular season basketball game where we're going to mess around for really 3.5 quarters. And then the final 2 minutes, we're going to turn on the Jets and everyone is going to have to understand the assignment. We're going to play our best version of football. And lo and behold, the winner is going to come away unscathed and move on to the next round. Let's, as we always do, start off with winners on this show. I give a lot of credit to Shannon Dawson for understanding that even in a short field position, you need to get the ball into your playmaker's hands. And for those of you that watch the preview, even though I picked Texas A&M to win, so Miami fans who are watching, my bad. I picked Texas A&M to win. Probably should have known better. Regardless, I'll move on. I'll survive. I said that the most dangerous player on the field in this game was going to be Malachi Tony. And for the most part, he was the most impactful player because of two major elements. The first one came with a Dalton Brooks forced fumble at midfield that ultimately could have led to A&M's momentum shifting fully in their direction and them being able to pull away with an easy win. A freshman critical mistake at the worst time possible where you need your offense to strike. But credit where credit's due to understanding you made a mistake. You had a really bad play. This is not the way that we envisioned how this was going to go, but you are our best skill player. We have got to be able to give you the opportunity to make your amends. And the redemption was as sweet as the price that it could pay. 10-yard touchdown run. It counts as a pass for Carson Beck, but really just a quick little shovel to the end zone. Easily hit the corner. A&M now struggling down by its touchdown, needing to be able to drive it over 90 yards down the field with less than 2 minutes on the clock. So that got to give a lot of credit to Shannon Dawson, one of the best play designs of the day. Got to give a lot of credit to Mark Fletcher. Had a performance that where there were moments it felt like, yeah, he was getting bottled on up. A&M's defensive line did a good job of winning their one-on-ones against the defense. Against Miami's offensive front. The explosive runs that he had were enough to shift momentum in favor of Miami on both scoring tries. Remember, he had the big 56-yard strike that got Miami into range for the Malachi Tony touchdown. He also had 2 runs of over 20 yards that eventually set up the one field goal. Let me remind everybody, the one field goal made on the day from the likes of from the likes of Carter Davis. Just the one. But he had a big-time run, so you got to get credit where credit's due. This was an offensive game plan that it felt like, for the most part, what we need to do is just play keep away from Marcel Reed. A lot of 3-and-outs. Try to get into field goal range. Hopefully, we'll be able to capitalize. And there were moments throughout the game that Carson Beck started gaining a little bit of momentum. He started to feel himself. The elements of the situation were kind of growing in his favor. But ultimately, just little details like taking an ill-advised sack that now from going on 3rd and 1 turned to 3rd and 9, not a problem. I mean, a very big-time problem. Just a really, really overall underwhelming performance in that standpoint. the defense for A&M was able to get pressure in the backfield. They were, whether or not you want to admit it was great pressure, still 2 sacks in the day, 7 tackles for losses. The other thing, though, is that you had to be able to guarantee that a team like Texas A&M, with its offensive pieces that had some really big time stars that were expected to step on up, they need to have a slow day. And so what did we notice in this matchup? They basically said, we're going to pressure Marcel Reed and take away your rushing attack. That is just the bottom line. No questions asked. When you get to the field, you are going to understand you're winning one way. They shut down the run game. They made sure that Marcel Reed was not able to make plays with his legs. 10 tackles for loss, 7 sacks on the day, a team averaging 89 yards, 2.5 yards per play. 2 running backs in Lavian Moss and Ruben Owens combining for 14 carries. They finished with less than 40 yards on the afternoon. That's just kind of the case. They made Marcel Reed beat them through the air. And what happened? You had a horrendous interception midway through the second half. And then you had another interception on the final drive that ultimately was caused because of a great play from Bryce Fitzgerald. Give a lot of credit where credit's due to 2 young guys. This is the foundation for Miami moving forward. Bryce Fitzgerald is a freshman linebacker on both instances, jumping the route. One for Nate Borkature. I believe the other one was in favor of Jamarian Morrow, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody go correct me on that. I'm going to go back and have to watch film. But still, to be able to make those type of plays, those veteran moments for Corey Heatherman's defense was a key deciding factor. And then on the flip side for Malachi Toney, a freshman who had never been in the spotlight before, had been playing his best version of football to close out 2025 and needed to make up for a redemption after nearly costing his team a win. For those two to be able to step on up, you got to feel pretty good about at least Miami having a foundation moving forward. Now, there are going to be a lot of questions that go into this offseason. Priority number 1, what do you do? What do you do? My bad. Bryce Fitzgerald is back, so my apologies on that one. My bad, guys. What do you do when it comes to the offense personnel? Because if you got to be better when it comes to the play calling, at least with Carson Beck, there are so many limitations to him. And I do think that going into next season, you are going to have some really good foundational names back for 2026. So how do you upgrade at the quarterback position? And number 2, how do you make sure that you're able to finish drives or at least put yourself in a better position inside the red zone? Because yes, I will blame the weather. I will say that the wind certainly factored into several of those missed 3-point attempts. But at the same time, to go that far, to have it be completely out of right, far to the right on 2 different instances, including one right before halftime to where momentum would have been in your favor and you could have won 13-3. That's where at this point you got to ask yourself, well, we're playing in Arlington. The last thing that we want to do is give any opportunity for Ohio State to capitalize and put up points against us. So regardless, hell of a win, I think, for Miami and its future, specifically its future with 2 young players who are going to be staples of this team long-term and keeping them a favorite in the ACC. And you know what? They get to say they beat the SEC. So whether or not you want to go ahead and say that A&M was overrated, whether or not you want to say that A&M has not been able to deliver at most of the time this year, or if you want to say that Miami was a really good team that could win a national title, whatever it is, they still beat the SEC. They get to hang their hat on that, and the only person to blame is quite literally Texas A&M. Okay, on to Texas A&M. The fact of the matter is that Miami's defense found a way to be able to make you one-dimensional. That's just the bottom line. And unfortunately, the thing that we had talked about throughout the season when it came to Marcel Reed was the inability to sometimes connect with his receivers in stride. Underthrown ball, overthrown ball, whatever it was, you saw the opportunities to where a play would go away from Texas A&M. And so the wind being a factor in this game, I think it was up to 18 miles at one point. You were throwing into the wind. Well, that means that you have to throw with a little bit more umph on the ball. What happened? Well, we saw a couple of plays that were far too outstretched for Casey Concepcion. We saw an underthrown pass that was supposed to go for Mario Craver when he was wide on open. You missed an open Ashton Bethel-Roman. You missed a Terry Bussey at times. So the inability to be able to build a consistent basis in the passing game really hurt you. The other thing is that you never were able to capitalize when you had the big time play. That's just it. I mean, you got to remember, Mario Craver had a 59-yard catch. An incredible play where he nearly lost the ball inbounds that would have been a turnover, but thankfully he stepped out of bounds ever so slightly And Marcel Reed and company, underneath an offensive play caller who now is leaving to go back to Manhattan, went kind of pedestrian when it came to the play design. And then unfortunately, both of your kickers, really, it wasn't Randy Bond, let's call it as is. It was Jared Zekel, missed an easy kick. So you weren't able to tie the game at that standpoint. But I thought you got way too conservative with the play calling, especially inside of the red zone. And you took a lot of emphasis out of what made your team so dynamic. Miami also did a really good job with Keontae Scott being able to play against a guy like Casey Concepcion to kind of make him obsolete. So being able to trust all of those elements, all those things that we saw during the regular season, that was where, you needed to go ahead and put together meaningful drives. And ultimately, it just came up short. But somehow, some way, because of both teams had a terrible, terrible first half and then did not play well in the third quarter, this was still a close game. And so Marcel Reed gets one more shot with less than 2 minutes on the clock and no timeouts to be able to drive downfield. And what's interesting is that we've seen this before. We have seen this opportunity to where A&M got to have moment. Lo and behold, they can't get the job done. But hell, you start off really strong. Big time pass to E.J. Smith, stops the clock. Get out of bounds with a short pass to Casey Concepcion. You're starting to build a rapport. Another pass for 14 yards. Big time run by Marcel Reed to go ahead and pick up a completion. 6-yard run by E.J. Smith. 14 pass downfield to Casey Concepcion. Just outside of the 3-yard line. Try to go to the back of the end zone. Now you're in the red zone, and it just comes up short. It just comes up quite literally right at the back of the line. Okay, so you miss the throw. So you get right back to it. You collide Ruben Owens with a linebacker, and you could have easily looked at for targeting. I'm not saying that you should have. I'm not saying that A&M probably was going to win that. Was going to win that call, but probably could have looked at targeting. Ball ricochets out of Ruben Owens' hands. Next play, you get Bryce Fitzgerald, make a big time pick. Lo and behold, that's all she wrote. A&M, they're going on home. They're sitting at 11-2 for the year. They close out the year as a perfect 11-0, and then somehow, some way, lose all the momentum against both Texas inside the red zone, and then right against Miami at the worst time possible. So, what do we make of this season for Texas A&M? I think it's the reality of sometimes, and this is what people don't want to hear, you benefit from having an easy schedule, you get tested. Unfortunately, this is where now kind of the chickens come home to roost. You weren't able to play a 4-quarter game plan offensively. Your defense wasn't able to win with a lot of pressures. You only had 2 sacks in the day compared to Miami 7. You had roughly a few smaller tackles for loss. So again, little things like that went a long way. And you can go ahead and say, well, a lot of the other things went against us too, Cole, because we lost the turnover battle. You're right. And ultimately, that might just be the deciding factor. But you outgained Miami 326 to 278. You outthrew Miami 237 to 103. You outgained them when it came to passing yards per play. You had fewer penalties than them. You were able to win the time of possession by nearly 9 minutes. It came down to 2 main elements. The inability to be able to score when you got inside the red zone, and number 2, the turnovers. And we talked about this before. Alabama was in full control against Oklahoma a few weeks ago when they faced off against the Sooners in their own backyard. They outgained them by over 200 yards. Guess what happened? They lost the turnover battle. They capitalized on the points. Lo and behold, that was good enough for the Sooners to go ahead and punch their ticket to a 10-2 season. Miami in this matchup did not have an elite game plan offensively, was very much hit and miss when it came to certain plays inside of the red zone. Your kicking game was atrocious, but they did not have the turnovers. They were able to put up the points outside of one major big-time blunder. One major big-time blunder by Malachi Toney. You couldn't put points on the board. They got the response. They got the redemption. Now they're going off to face off against a team in Arlington to maybe keep their season alive. I'm not sure if they will, but at least they can say they've earned the right to put themselves in that category. There'll be a lot of questions that I think that Marcel Reed will have about what to do on that final drive. There'll be a lot of questions to what you ask Mike Elko about what was up with the play calling, what happened on certain plays to allow them to be able to find any momentum on the ground with Mark Fletcher. Because again, he had himself a day. He was running rampant against a really good defensive line and kind of making them look like a JV roster. So what happened in that fourth quarter that gave momentum to Miami, took momentum all the way out of A&M, and they eventually had to go for it on a third down really bad throw, ill-advised timing pass, and now they're sitting waiting for an opportunity to wonder if they can make a run now to beat up in a team in Arlington. That's just the bottom line. It is. And I can't sit here and argue with it. A&M had a very underwhelming game plan offensively. It was enough of a game plan offensively from Shannon Dawson in the fourth quarter. Big time runs from Mark Fletcher. Malachi Tony gets his redemption story. And that's all she wrote. 10-3 final score out of Kyle Field. At least you can say at this point, maybe if Miami can fix a few things, that defensive line is legit. They are going to be able to have, I think, a better offensive person. I mean, they do have a great offensive line. You can't just rely on the explosives. But if you don't, who knows what the hell we're going to see in 2 weeks in Arlington when you take on Ohio State. Let's get to the comments section before we get on out of here. By the way, I did see somebody actually bring this on up, and I want to agree with you. The roughing the passer call on Marcel Reed, I also agree. I don't think it was there. I just don't. It was not a call that I would have gone against them. That tacked on 15. Ultimately, it didn't matter. But you know what? At the same time, that's what we say. Two mid teams. Listen, two mid teams. Okay. I do want to start off with this before we go any further. So there are going to be some people that decide to have a conversation on what does this mean for Notre Dame. And I will not say Texas here. Okay, Texas fans, you played better down the stretch than Texas A&M. You had 3 ranked wins against top 10 teams. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. You look like the more complete team in November than Texas A&M did. Okay, we're just going to go there. Not going to say you made it in the college football playoff, but I digress from that standpoint. You probably could have, but it doesn't matter. Okay, now back to the conversation with Notre Dame. Notre Dame fans are losing their mind right now saying we belong in the college football playoff. Because guess what? We were playing our best version of football to close out the day. And did you see the way that Miami was playing in the first half? Bad field goals. You blaming the wind because of a missed PAT. Like, you doing all that? Texas A&M can't run the football. Yeah, bad turnover by Marcel Reed. It's a sloppy game, a lot of punts, a lot of 3 and outs, negative yardage. We belong in the college football playoff. And then we watched last night's game where Alabama and Oklahoma, it's a 17-0 swing. Alabama looks dead. They come back and they mount a 34-7 comeback. They dominate in terms of the turnover battle, and they don't have a terrible battle on special teams, therefore doing just enough to guarantee their spot in the postseason. So what was the real emphasis here? My point being is that at least at the end of the day, Notre Dame has no reason to gripe anymore. Like, because of if A&M and Tech and Miami both balled on out, they still would have said we were going to be up by 30 because the way we were playing to close out the year. Here's the way that I view it. You gave up 41 points to this Texas A&M offense. This offense that was dreadful for 3.5 quarters. No, I'll phrase that. For all 60 minutes, dreadful performance. You gave up 41 to them. You gave up 27 points to this defense, to this Miami offense. An offense that took all the way down to the fourth quarter to find any spark, like at all, when it came to the passing attack and Mark Fletcher to finally make some plays. And you want to sit here and say that you belong in the playoff? You lost both those games to teams that right now had no offensive identity. So spare me. So spare me if you are a Notre Dame fan that is coming on here and saying, we belong in the playoff. Well, if you would have won one of these games, you would have been in. But guess what happened? You lost both. You looked terrible at times in both. And ultimately, Miami looked really good at one game. And Texas A&M was able to pull the wool over the eyes with a fourth quarter comeback against Notre Dame. So they belong in the playoff. And you can't go ahead and tell me that Alabama didn't belong in because of when it came time to turn on the Jets, they basically stole the blueprint of what worked against them when they faced off against Oklahoma the first time, and they use it as an advantage to put themselves in the winner's column and now face off against Indiana. I do believe that Notre Dame was playing like a top 10 team to close out the year. But by golly, you got to sit down and shut the hell up if you're going to utilize that as an advantage to say you belong in the playoff. Because you can't say in one breath, well, Alabama looked dreadful against a Georgia team and still did not look great last night at times against Oklahoma, but they were able to get a double-digit win. They were able to beat the over in this game. Meanwhile, you beat the over in both of your games, but you were 0-2 in teams that lost. So, yeah, they're two mid-teens, but at the same time, it doesn't matter because, in my opinion, Notre Dame had no reason to go ahead and bitch and gripe. If anything, I would say Vanderbilt, BYU, and honestly, even Texas had a better argument at this point because of at least Texas was able to put belt to ass to one of these teams. Hell, even SMU, I think, could have made the case because of at least they won their game. Screw Texas. Yeah, to an extent they did. Vandy is still trash when Mama Boy leave. They're back in the SEC standings. Probably. We don't know. One and done Aggie. They are. One and done Oklahoma. Yeah, they are. By the way, if you're a Texas fan, you got to be elated right now because even if your team's not in the playoff, which by the way, you'll be here next year, like you just will. I can almost guarantee that Sark will not allow, now with Coach Boom running the show, you to miss back-to-back playoff appearances. At least you get to say your two rivals, you beat them in the regular season. They made the college football playoff. They went 0-2. Like, at least you get to say that as kind of like a clearing confidence that we all see it. We also that third interception coming on that third down. You could feel it. Yeah, it felt that way. It felt like that Marcel Reed was going through his progression far too quickly. He was not surveying the field. And the second that it released through his hands, you could tell that Fitzgerald was going to jump the route, put themselves in the position to where easily they were getting the play on the football, and they were going to win that game. Tulane has no business being in the playoff, losing 7-0 right now. All right, Tulane has no business being in the playoff because of no G5 team should be in the playoff simply because of what they didn't accomplish during the season. That's it. But the ruling states, because of conference champions, you get 5 in and one has to be a G5 rep, they do belong in the playoff. But I can tell you, much like Alabama, if they would have crapped the bin and lost last night in embarrassing fashion to Oklahoma, sorry about that, they would have then said conference championship weekend should not be the only deciding factor on why you get into the playoff. For the new format that has not been set in stone and won't be set in stone for a while, because of, again, you have until the 23rd. How are we going to go to expansion? What are we going to do? Some other things. You got to remind yourself that for this team, if they don't end up showing on up, they will change the rules. Right now, it's 14-0, and you got to Ole Miss driving once again. It's probably going to be a moment where they say, we'll give one at-large bid to a G5 program, but we're not doing this twice. And also, we got to make sure that we see what happens in the matchup between JMU and Oregon. Oregon's going to be down like multiple wide receivers. I still don't think it matters. Remember the Aggie D-line who came on in talking smack before Texas and Miami? We all saw this coming, potentially. How is OU one of the most overrated teams this year? Goofed, one of the more national pundits, struggled to make a bowl game. I don't think OU was overrated. I think OU looked dreadful during their matchup against Texas. I thought their offense was very much the reason why they finished the year 10-2, but they had a national championship defense. And there were moments last night, even in the Alabama game, especially early on, where you saw that national championship defense show on up. The problem was you just didn't have a consistent offensive basis where, hey, actually, surprisingly, John Mateer threw for back-to-back 300-yard performances. Guess what happened? They won in one and they lost in the other, and largely it was due to bad turnovers. Do you don't want to hear anybody excuse for A&M? All we heard was weapons, 12th man, Reed better than Beck, blah, blah, blah. Canes dominate. Canes did not dominate in this game. Canes dominated the fourth quarter. I will give you that. Canes absolutely dominated the fourth quarter, but not the game at all. They had back and forth battles. They were able to win a lot of one-on-one battles in the trench. They made A&M obsolete on the ground, which has been the strength and emphasis for this team. And they were able to take away several marquee plays throughout momentous drives because they were winning their battles in coverage. But it was not a dominant factor. What they did was they capitalized at the right time. And then came the fourth quarter, and I will give you that one, Raul. They 100% dominated against Texas A&M. It wasn't even remotely close, especially on the ground game. A&M straight trash, and the season's collapse will still run the state. You shit talking about Texas, guarantee we beat the shit out of Miami. Right, but you also had 3 losses and a loss to a team that Miami beat by double digits in their own backyard. So, let's just call it as is. That's all I can say from this one. Miami got away with targeting Roll Tide. Probably, but at the same time, if A&M goes to overtime, do you really trust that Miami, with the momentum they were playing with, they weren't going to win the game? And that's just where I'm at. This dude, it's been a great weekend of college football. I love this weekend. I really do. I think that it is a fantastic weekend of college football. It's a great weekend to be a Longhorn. Absolutely. No trophies for the best Aggie team in ever. Okay. Sam Van Lilbro still trash. SEC sucks. Reed sucks. You're going to have to be able to bring that up. I will say Marcel Reed, he has made some really, really, really bad throws. You're crazy. The SEC doesn't suck. Okay, you guys are arguing with each other. Man amongst boys. Yeah, Fletcher was phenomenal in this game, averaging over 6.2 yards a play. Finishes with 172 rushing yards, 2 runs of over 40 yards downfield, 2 runs of over 20 yards downfield. Got to be really consistent with that. Miami is the real ACC champs. Miami is the real ACC champs. Like, I'm sorry. There is nobody whatsoever that I would say belong to that conversation. And by the way, Jim Phillips changed the freaking rules about how you go about conference championships, because we all knew that Miami was the only team that was good enough if they won their conference championship that could win games. That's just it. So, like, in the future, can we change rules? Because if not, we're absolutely going to be in trouble. Horns gave Miami the best plan to beat it and run the game ball. Was the last 2 games Miami whooped, was there the last 2 times Miami whooped ND's ass? Yep. Reed was the most on the 5-yard touchdown run. No expansion, eliminate auto bids, kick the G5 out. Again, those are all going to be questions that we have at some point that need to be answered by people that are not you and me, who actually love college football and are just not looking for a cash grab check. We're going to end the live stream there. I got to do a radio hit with CBS Sports. So before we leave, let me tell you about my friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/SECU. Perfect place to sign it up right now. Get started with $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Could be on Malachi Toney being next year's Biletnikoff Award winner, Heisman Trophy winner. Could be on Carson Beck to pull the upset over Ohio State. Could be on Texas A&M having a brand new quarterback in 2025. The app is free, simple, easy to use. Now is the perfect time to sign up with college basketball in full swing, the NBA in full swing, and of course, how could we forget about college football still going into bowl season? Signing up right now, FanDuel.com/SECU. Final score from Kyle Field, 10-3 Miami. They move on. They stay in the state of Texas to take down the Ohio State Buckeyes. And as for the Aggies, they got a lot of things they got to clean up this offseason. And honestly, it may not be just a play caller. Really underwhelming way to close out 2025. Do they belong in the college football playoff at 11-1? Yeah, I'll go that far. Do they belong to say that they were as a challenging team? And now you got to ask yourself, were they supposed to be alongside Georgia and Alabama? And maybe you could even say Oregon and Ole Miss? Probably not. Talk to you guys after the Ole Miss game. Peace.